Jeff, what's going on, man? Welcome to Dad Edge.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, you bet, man. Let's well, real quick before we get started, let's you want to start with some warm-up questions, some fun ones?
Let's hop right into it.
All right, let's do it. So how long you been married?
I've been married 4 years and 2 months.
Oh, you
Not
even
that I'm
know
keeping track.
months? Dang, man.
And counting my blessings every single day.
Miss Adamson, as you're hearing this conversation, I just wanted to let you know that there are a lot of guests that come on the podcast that have to like literally like think about how many years they've been married, more or less the months. So you're married to a very, very good man who pays attention to detail. So how about that?
Well, my wife made it easy for me because we got married on August 18th, 2018. And so she's not superstitious, but she's from Ukraine. So she's from Kiev, and I feel like the farther you go east, the more like superstitious like things come into play.
Yeah.
And the number eight is like an important number. I think it means like infinity, and so being able to get married on the eighth month, the 18th day, 2018, she was like, okay, like that's got to be like we're gonna need all the help we can get to kind of get through life. So let's just take that one little superstitious thing. I think we had to fight off a lot of other people who also wanted that day, and but that makes it easy for me to keep track of.
Well, you just spoiled it then, man. Like, because like I just thought you were like this brilliant genius that paid attention to detail, and lo and behold, it's just the
Just
breadcrumbs that your wife wanted to leave behind for to remember the date.
it's just pure luck.
Oh, it's so funny, man. How about this? What do you like to do in your spare time outside of work and family? Things that bring you joy.
You know what? I was an athlete most of my life, Larry, and for me, I kind of subscribe to the belief that you have to kind of take care of yourself in order to take care of anyone. And so making sure that I'm staying healthy. So me and a few other crazy guys will kind of go out for pretty long runs, and that's actually so our mutual friend Jake and our mutual friend Matt, we recently went out for a 60-kilometer run through this like remote mountain pass in Alberta, and so that's something that I like to do is to kind of just stay fit so I can kind of keep clear between the ears. It's not exactly like enjoyable because like doing like 100-mile races is kind of painful, but being a wrestler, you kind of just like lean into the pain, into the suffering, and so I like getting out into nature, getting out, doing trail running, and staying fit.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, do you work out? Do you stay fit because you want to keep it clear in between the ears, or do you do it more for the physical benefits of it?
Like, and actually, I wonder this too with other former high performance athletes, is that like when you retire from sport, you have like you're never going to be as fit as you were. And I know a lot of athletes, they go through a bit of a depression after they step away from the sport. And like I was on the Canadian national wrestling team for well over a decade and competed around the world. And so the peak of my fitness was like a long time ago. So I know that I'm never going to be that fit again. So for me, it's more about like I want to make sure that I'm healthy so that I can provide better for my family, for my friends, that I can get more done. And like I'm never going to look as good as I did in when I was at the Olympics in 2012, or competing at the World Championships, but at least I can kind of feel good and have a good positive mindset that I think exercise brings. But yeah, no, like, I guess why do you work out?
I always say I love your interpretation of training and that kind of thing. I always say that fitness for me is it clears the cobwebs, it refreshes me mentally and emotionally. It's therapy for me. It's where I get my stress release from. It's where I hit the reset button mentally and emotionally. And I always say the physical benefits are just a byproduct. It's a bonus in my mind.
Yeah,
Because even if I wasn't getting like the physical benefits of training, I would still do it because it
yeah,
is that therapeutic for me. One of the things that my 16-year-old and I just started doing, so my 16-year-old, he was doing, he's in marching band in high school, but he loves to work out. He's like a sprinter on track and he loves to work out and train. And he just got done with band. And he's like, Dad, he's like, I don't have anything going on after school right now. He's like, I'd love to start training again. I'm like, yeah, man, let's do it.
Awesome.
So we had our first training session yesterday. And I always tell, I mean, we come out of the gym like on cloud nine and we train hard. You know, I mean, we train every body part that we train when we train it to mechanical failure, right? And we train really, really hard and we love it. And I was telling him as we left the gym at about 5 p.m. last night, I said, man, I am so ready for the second part of my day. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, I just love, I used to train and I still kind of train in the morning. I do my cardio in the morning, which sets me up for the
Mhm.
first half. And then
Mhm.
I like to do the weight training in the back half or in the middle, because it's this reset button mentally and emotionally that like now I am ready for family. And the one thing he asked me too, he's like, well, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, when you're a dad and when you are a dad, you're going to realize that you have two big important jobs. One is your career and how you provide. And the second is, which is the most important of the two, which is you are a dad and husband. And
Mhm.
what most men do is they come home from their workday, they're mentally and emotionally, sometimes even physically spent. And it's very hard for them to show up big at home. It's one of the hardest, it is one of the hardest transitions going from work
Mhm.
dad to family dad. And I said, when we train, man, like my mind, my heart, my emotions, I am ready for whatever the evening is going to bring. And on days that we don't train, I'm usually less equipped. And
Mhm.
so, you know, it's I don't train for the abs. I don't train for, you know, how lean I am. I train because it gets me
Mhm.
mentally, emotionally ready for those things.
Do you find that the second workout is harder mentally for you to get around to? Like I find like working on the evening is the hardest thing because my discipline is weaker. Um, like, do you find that that's the one that you will often skip, or is this it's not non-negotiable with yourself? Like you make it happen every time.
It's a good point. So I am more of a morning workout person. I do enjoy the morning workouts. It gets my mind and everything ready. Now, on days that I would train by myself, I'm less I'll still go, but I'm less motivated and less excited. But if I have one of my boys with me, which
Hmm.
is if I train in the afternoon, they are with me.
Hmm.
So when they're like, "You ready to go?" It's like you can't say no to that, right?
Oh man,
No matter how tired you are or how much you don't feel like doing it, I'm like, "Yeah, man, let's go." Yeah.
that's gotta make you feel so good though. Like as a father to have your son like actually want to work out with you. Like that to me is not a common thing.
It's not. And, you know, what I have found is I've had that question a lot. Like, how do your boys get excited about working out with you? Like a lot of guys who work out, they're like, my kids dread, like, they don't even want to work out with me.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, I was like, from the time, because even my 8-year-old, like, I'll do push-ups with him and stuff like that. I even, when they're little and when they're younger, I am not looking for a workout to decimate them, right? I am looking for something that is going to, that they're smiling, that we're having fun, that we're joking, that we're laughing. It's kind of like Little League, right? If your kids are in Little League, it's better that they're having fun and they find joy in the sport in the beginning and not something that it's like militant and they dread, right? So
Hmm.
when we do family workouts in the garage and stuff like that, and we've always made them fun, like we're laughing, we're cutting up, you know, it's like, and of course, like, you know, be like, oh, come on, man. Like how many more push-ups can you do than me? Right. And they'll, you know, sometimes I'll let them win and that kind of thing. But it's all about like, let's go out and have fun. It's more of a
Yeah.
social event than a physical mental beatdown. Right.
Yeah, and I feel like that's not super common, like especially with organized sports, and because I live in Canada, Calgary, Alberta. I'm from Saskatchewan, and growing up, like hockey is the thing that just dominates everything. And I played hockey from like kindergarten or grade one to grade eight, and it's like pretty much after the first year or two, it's like intense. Like the coaches are screaming at the kids, like there's like relentless discipline, and there's just no fun in it. Like it wasn't about falling in love with the sport. It was about like who's going to make the NHL.
Yeah.
And obviously like a lot of them do, but I mean for me that's why I fell in love with wrestling, is that it was just it wasn't it felt like fun to me. And for my two kids, my two sons, I really I'm like thinking through it right now, like and every day actually I'm thinking like we just started taking my oldest David to gymnastics, and I'm just like, okay, just like make sure that it's not about like winning right now. It's just like, you know, have him enjoy just being there, and make it fun. But I mean, as a 16-year-old or as a teenager, I imagine that's much more difficult. Did you start that earlier, and then he just kind of
We did. We started that early. Like, the kid, we started working out with the kids when they were like 6 and 8 years old. And I'm not talking about like kids are doing deadlifts, right? I'm talking about we would do like jump rope, right? And we would do push-ups and we'd do sit-ups. And, I'd get them up on the pull-up bar. And I mean, there's even photos and videos where I'm just like bracing them and obviously helping them do their pull-ups.
yeah,
And we make the workout a celebration. And it's not enabling like, oh, everybody gets a trophy, right? It's like, hey man, how hard can we push ourselves? And then we're gonna celebrate, right? So if I'm like, how many pull-ups do you think you get? If they're like 6, I'm like, all right, great. And in my mind, I'm like, you can get 7. And then they're
mm,
going and going, like, come on, man, you got one more, you got one more, you got one more. Let's go, man, let's go. And then they get it, and you're like, boom, right? And you're like, that's what I'm talking about, right? And then they're smiling, and I'm smiling, high fiving. But that's been their experience with our workouts growing up, because I know some, you see parents in the sporting stands constantly, like if their kid
hmm
doesn't get the goal in soccer, or they strike out at the plate, or they whiff they miss a tackle, all right, on the football field. Parents go freaking nuts, man.
hmm
And we have in our high school program, we've got this quarterback, and his dad is in the stands, and the stands are full, and this kid plays varsity quarterback. And I always tell my wife, I was like, I feel so sorry for that kid, because his dad is freaking crazy, man. Like he yells and screams, and his kid can't hear him. He's in a huge stand, all these stand like, and I'm like, if this guy is anything like where he's like in the stands, he's probably worse actually behind closed doors. Like, I don't even want to be
yeah,
this kid like at all.
yeah,
But I think you can decimate, a kid's experience by that. I think you can also teach a kid resilience, how to push through hard things, but do it while we're both like smiling, having
yeah.
fun, right? Versus like, you better do one more. Come on, man. What's wrong with you, right? You can't do
Get
that. So,
grounded if you don't.
right. Yeah, there's gonna be hell to pay. But for you growing up, so you started wrestling at 6. And I'm curious, what was it like growing up for you? Wrestling is a sport, in my personal opinion, like no other, right? There's no team to hide behind when a mistake is made. I have never, my son, actually, it's funny, as we're recording this, my 14-year-old, today is his first day of wrestling practice for freshman high school. So he wrestled before. He did 3 years of like little league wrestling.
Yeah.
But I've never been a part of, as a parent, and I wrestled too, um, an emotionally charged and draining experience for your kid than to watch your kid wrestle, whether they're
hmm
winning or they get a beat down. It is like,
hmm
it's craziness. But for you,
hmm
what was it like growing up for you, like with your own dad and parents and your experience with wrestling?
Yeah, and so growing up in Canada, it's a hockey craze country,
Yeah,
and
it's a big deal.
so I was, and it's strange because my parents, neither one of them were really athletes. They were, they just basically kind of had jobs. They never really exercised all that much, although they do now a ton. But they put my brother and my sister and I into kind of as many things as possible. So it was like gymnastics, baseball, hockey, canoeing, wrestling. I'm probably missing some, and they kind of just like put me into them. And I remember asking my dad, kind of like, how did I land on the sports that I ended up pursuing? And wrestling was predominantly the one that I did. And he said like the other ones, they kind of just fell off. Like they just kind of like my interest wasn't there at all. And so wrestling kind of just took over. And for me, I'm wondering now that I'm a father, is like, well, how do you know when to push your kid to kind of go versus when do you kind of just like step back and that's something I'm going to have to kind of figure out as we go. But for wrestling, for me, it just was something that um, I think I had success at. Early on, I was able to have success and win, but it also there was like a play aspect to it. I didn't dread going to practice versus like a lot other things. It was a bit more of a drag, and now that I'm older, um, to me, it just mimics life so much.
Mhm.
You know, and there's nothing as kind of emotional or exhausting or revealing as wrestling. And as a kid, like you get exposed to that, and it's really tough. But then I think what it did is it really prepared me for kind of what was going to come, as I grew up. And in Canada too, I got exposed to a lot of things too. I got to travel around the country, and yeah, I got to go to, native reserves up in northern Saskatchewan, and compete against kids that, growing up in incredibly harsh conditions. I got to go, coast to coast across Canada. Got to make a ton of friends, and all of my closest friends were also on the team as well. So, and I think you probably understand this, Larry, is that like when you go through incredible difficulties with other people, it kind of binds you together with those people. And wrestling, as you know, is like incredibly difficult. So you just have this kinship with, your brothers across the team. And for me, that was like a really important support structure growing up, and kind of knowing like, all right, like physically, I've strengthened myself, mentally, I've strengthened myself, relationship wise, I was able to build those out. And I think it just gave me this foundation, to kind of go after the things that I believed in, and kind of go after my dreams.
That is so cool. Most people, when it comes to sports, it's hard for them to find that in any sport, right? I mean, I remember so my oldest, my 16-year-old, when he was 11, he played hockey. I know, like you said, hockey is sort of a big sport in Canada, just a little bit, right? It's like the sport, right?
Yeah.
But my son just couldn't wait, man. He played he played learn to play when he was a little guy. All he could talk about
Mhm,
was wanting to play hockey.
mhm,
And so when he was 11 years old, we signed him up for this team, and he had to kind of try out, even though the team wasn't necessarily like select, but they were trying to like discover like what skill set are these kids at, and we need to put them on the appropriate team to make sure that that skill set's represented and give these kids the best environment. So there were 5 different levels, right? There's what
mhm,
there was 3 levels under competitive, and there were 2 levels under recreation, right?
mhm,
So there was gold and silver under rec. So he was under silver, which was, the lowest level at the time. It's kind of like the novice, the very beginning, right?
mhm,
So at that age, at 11, right, we're expecting, and we've been in youth sports ever since the kids could basically walk. They've done every
mhm,
sport known to man. So we were expecting like, well, this is a rec league. So we're probably going to get a coach that has the mentality of like, let's get you guys to learn, right? What's most
mhm,
important to learn. This guy who coached them was the worst coach I have ever seen in my life. These kids, this was 11U rec league, lowest rec league possible for this skill level. And this guy, he'd be a great coach, but for college level, like D1
mhm.
college, right? This dude would scream, yell, curse at these kids. The guy got out of 12 games, he got kicked out of 3 by the
Mhm.
refs because he's yelling so much at the refs, and completely and totally decimated my son's experience of hockey.
Yeah,
And my
what
son,
a great example to set for the kids, and they're so impressionable too. Like I
yeah,
remember every coach I've ever had. I remember exactly what they were like. I
yeah,
remember exactly how they made me feel. And that's probably why I stuck with wrestling. To be honest, is that I had a great coach, Shane Bradley, and he was just one of these guys that is able to get you to work harder than you ever thought you could. He could push you beyond your limits. And he's able to do it in a way that wasn't demeaning, it wasn't degrading. You didn't feel, like you were worthless afterwards. And you're going to failure all the time. And I think that's something that, even at the company that I run now, Neo Financial, that's what we look for in the people that we hire. If they're going to be leading people, is like, yeah, the goal is like to get this person to reach their absolutely, maximum potential. But they're not going to do that if they're miserable. They're not going to do that if they don't respect you. They're not going to do that if they don't believe in what they're doing is worthwhile. And I think that I was just like super lucky to have coaches like that. And you know who's a great coach? Like Jake, our friend Jake Herbert. Um, we were, throwing on some wrestling camps in Saskatchewan, my hometown, Saskatoon. We brought Jake in to lead a camp. He almost got trapped at the border, but I was able to sneak him through the border and get him into Canada. But he leads just an amazing camp. Like this guy, he's got the kids energized. It's positive. It's uplifting. He like turns everything into a game, and it's like games that kids are happy to play, and also teenagers are happy to play as well. And by changing it, and one of the things he actually does, they're called like I think they're called strap bands. It's basically like little straps you put around your ankles, and what you're trying to do is, and they have Velcro on them, and what you're trying to do is rip the Velcro strap off of your opponent's ankles, and attack bands. That's what they're called. And you go from like these kids who are not really knowing exactly how to move, and all of a sudden, now that they know that like the exact thing that they're trying to do, they're moving like world class movement. They're moving around, they're having fun, they're like showing off what they, that they got the band off of someone's ankle. And I think like things like that are just so important for people to kind of, in order for someone to fall in love with a sport, you need to be able to kind of bring those things in, and kind of give kids these kind of emotions that they're going to have.
I agree. I think, even if you think of life, right, Jeff? I think of, the way I coach some of my clients, right, is to, and sooner or later, we're going to have an app out too, like the Dad Edge app, which is going to help men with positive habits, but it's going to be an app where it helps you gamify these things, right?
Mm,
Where you can kind of keep score. So like, for instance, I have a journal that I use, and what I do is I plan everything Sunday night. I go look at my calendar. I pop in the things that are on my calendar, like this podcast interview and that kind of thing. But then I also pop in like, what am I celebrating at the end of by the end of the week on Friday, right?
mm,
My my faith goals are in there. So how often I pray, and I keep
hmm
track of that. How often I do cardio, how often I work out, quality time with my kids, so like date nights and that kind of thing. And I will literally then come up with a potential score that I can achieve by Friday. And what I will tell you is that it doesn't ever when I live my life that way, it doesn't become a have to do. It becomes like, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to decimate my score. And I'm going to own this
Nice.
week. And by the end of Friday, I'm going to tack up 21 points because that's what's available to me. I might even go out and get bonus points for something that's not even on here right now. And
Yeah.
when I live my life like that, I don't necessarily feel like that overwhelm of like, oh my God, I have so much crap to do today. Right. I was like, I'm going to nail this because I'm going to get a few points at the end of the day. But I love
Yeah.
that theme of gamifying things because I think
Yeah.
that holds true for like kids, right? I mean, I even think of like, if you want your kid to learn how to run faster, get out and run
Mm,
with them. Be like, come on, man, I know you can beat me. Come on, there's an ice cream on the line. Let's go. Right. You talk to them like that versus like, dude, you got to get faster. Come on. Right.
mm.
That's not going to motivate a kid. But I like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that like even what you're saying, it kind of reminds me like the most important things are usually the obvious things,
mhm.
like the things that kind of deep down that you should be doing, and you're just not doing them for whatever reason. And I was running to work. I run to work every day, and right now
You run to
that's
work every day.
yeah. Well, to me, like it just makes more sense because I can run to work faster than I can drive there, and then I also get a workout in.
Yeah.
The
So
challenge, Larry,
how long is the
it's
run?
it's like it's 6 kilometers. It's not terribly long, and
It's like three
I'll
miles, right? For us
oh,
morons here in the
yeah.
States.
Yeah, what's the currency trading at now? No, so yeah, it's probably like four miles
I think it's
probably.
3.1, right? Because there's 6K, or that's 5K. Never mind. Yeah, it's like 4
I
miles.
just I,
Yeah.
I love talking to Americans because like sometimes Like I remember actually convinced Jake that America, like Canada, actually there's less minutes in an hour in Canada, and like just how there's different time zones, different
Yeah.
miles. We were on the metric time system, um, and so I got a good pulled his leg on that one good. But no, to me it's like I've kind of I know that I need exercise, and if I have to dedicate a separate workout for that, then that's going to have to come out of other time in my day, whether it's running the company or with my family. And one of the guys in the elevator was like, "You ran to work. It was minus 44 here in Canada on yesterday." And he's like, "You ran to work today?" And to me, it's like it's not a big deal at all because it's just 4 miles. And I was just like, you know what? Like if you take choice out of the decision, then or out of the equation, then it's just life is a lot simpler.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's just something that I do. And
Say
it
that
just kind of
again.
like,
Say that again.
well, if you just kind of take choice out of the equation, then
Yeah.
life is a lot simpler because we just have so many choices of things to do. And to me, like running to work is just something I do now. And I don't have to ever like think about whether I'm going to do it today. Like, oh, is the weather out or do I have time? It's just like I do it every time and I make sure, and that way it's non-negotiable. And what I like about what you're talking about with the app you're building is that if someone can just say, hey, like keeping track of these things and like creating checklists and setting goals and like deciding what I'm going to celebrate at the end of the week, if you just kind of make that something that you do from now on and it's non-negotiable, then it becomes a lot easier than if you're like, okay, I got to get around to doing this, and oh, like I have to force yourself to, deciding if you're gonna like make that list today versus like, no, it's just like this is what I do now. It's gonna suck. Like it sucked yesterday, it's gonna suck today when I go again, but it's just something that I do now, and I know that I'm doing it because it's what's best for me.
So do you run home too?
Yeah.
So you're talking like 8 miles a day you're running in this freezing weather, right?
Yeah, and like and then the thing, even like when I'm running and it's so cold. Like the other day, it was a full on blizzard. We had almost a foot of snow, and the snow is like hitting my eyes. I can barely, open my eyes. The wind was so strong, and I'm just like, this kind of sucks right now. I can't feel my forehead. My hands are completely numb. But this is like 8 a.m. on the way to the office, and so for me, it's like one of my friends at work says, the first thing you do at the beginning of the day, you just try to eat the frog. You do the
Yep.
thing that you just do the thing that sucks the first thing in the day, and everything else after that is easier. And that to me is kind of like something that I kind of prescribe to is or subscribe to is that you just doing hard things is good for you, and it just makes everything else easier after that. And doing startups is extremely difficult mentally. Um, it's most of them fail, like 99% of startups fail, and you know most of them don't have anywhere near the outcomes that we're striving for. Running long races, again, like it's insanity to run 100 miles in a day, but to me it's like just setting those things as the goal, and then saying I'm going to I'm not going to make it optional of whether or not I pursue them anymore. And then you just work backwards from there and saying, okay, well, if I want to do this, then I'm going to need to do all these other things. I'm going to need to be healthy. I'm going to need to have a support system. I'm going to need to have a team around me. I'm going to need to have my days structured, um, while leaving a little bit of flexibility for some creativity. But it just it makes I like having life being simple, and I feel like many things in the world are just getting more and more complex, and I just don't. My brain doesn't work that way. I don't have time for it.
Yeah. There's something. So you're obviously an ultra marathoner as well.
I feel like if you're an ultra marathoner, like that's like how you identify. And like I'm a wrestler. Like I think obviously I'm not entering competitions anymore, but I will still always kind of identify as one. And ultra marathons is just something that I've found that is like I can do it. It's really hard, but I learn a ton about myself in the process. But I just don't. If I start saying I'm an ultra marathoner, all the like the real ones are gonna come out and be like, you're not an ultra marathoner. Like, look at you're
Yeah.
180 pounds. Like, your times are terrible.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. There's something to be said. I remember hearing, this was one of my clients a long time ago, who he loved doing marathons and Spartan races and Tough Mudders. Like there was always something on his calendar, right? And I'd always ask him, I was like, don't you get tired of this? Like, don't you want to break from this and that kind of thing? And he's like, dude, no. He's like, you know why? I was like, why? And he's like, because when I put something on my calendar that I'm prepping for, exactly what you just said, right? It no longer becomes a choice. It's something I'm going to do to train for it. And here's the cool thing too. A lot of people feel that if I put something on the calendar and I'm training for it, it's a burden. It actually isn't, because the whole choice thing of waffling, whether or not I'm going to do whatever, goes away.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting.
That's
It's
exhausting.
like
Yeah.
it's like every Friday, it's like you completely destroy your health and your diet that you work so hard for Monday through Thursday. And
Hmm.
because well, I'll just get started again on Monday, right? It's like how many Friday and Saturday nights have destroyed your health goals knowing that another Monday is coming. This past year, my 14-year-old and I did a bodybuilding show together,
Hmm.
and it was his idea. And he told me about it.
I got
And
to meet
dude,
your kids, man.
oh, he's also my wrestler too. He's insanely competitive, right? And but in a good way, also very humble. Like, he'll make big plays on the football field, he'll do big things. And he's the kid who comes off the field and he just walks and never celebrates. People are patting him. He's like, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. But
Yeah.
he told me on New Year's Eve last year in 2021, hey, we're doing a bodybuilding show on April 30th, me and you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? What? What are we doing? And so I do have a history with that. I competed from 95 to 2011. I did like 13 shows. And then
Wow.
my wife told me and I'm never a big guy, by the way. I'm like, when I hit the stage, I'm 160 pounds and just lean. That's really it. And never done roids or anything like that. I'm just a skinny, lean guy on stage. That's really what it boils down to. And
Yeah.
so my son tells me, he's like, yeah, it's what I want, because we sit down as a family every year on New Year's Eve and we're like, hey, what is Team Hagner going to do this year? Right. What big things are we celebrating? Right. And we got
Hmm.
to my son and he's like, you and I are doing a bodybuilding show on April 30th. I've already researched it. It's in Liberty, Missouri. They do allow kids as young as 13 years old to compete, and we're doing
Hmm.
it. And I'm looking at myself. I was like, dude, I haven't competed in 10 years, man. And I'm 195 pounds and about 20% body fat right now. And you're giving me 16 weeks heads up. Like, I need 6 months, bro. And he's like, yeah. And we're still doing it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so here was the
That's
cool
awesome.
thing. At that point in my life last year, I wouldn't say my health took a backseat because I've always been in the gym. I've always made healthier, quote unquote, food choices. But that point in my life, I was heavier than what I normally am. I was a little fatter
Hmm.
than I normally am, and I was like, oh, New Year's Eve. But putting that thing on the calendar that scared the shit out of me. And here's why I was more nervous about that show than any other show, because I was like, my God, I don't want to embarrass my kid, right? Like his old man's going to be up here with him,
Hmm.
and I don't want to let him down,
Hmm.
right? But the pressure was on. But the cool thing about that is there was no more question. There were no
Hmm.
more Mondays where I was going to restart. I was like, cool, man. And what I will tell you is that, and I've told my wife this, I thrive in super tight structure where there are no choices. Like, I'm
Hmm.
doing this thing because it's on the calendar and it's going to be done whether
Yeah.
I want to do it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like you also kind of have to ask yourself what kind of man you want to be. And
Yeah.
I feel like the world is full of people who set goals and then don't achieve them, and then that's fine. Like, and like unfortunately, that's the majority of people. They either don't set any goals or they do, and then it's just something written on the calendar, and it will come and go, and hopefully no one will ask you about it. And if they do, you'll just say you got busy. And to me, I never wanted to be the type of person who like I almost felt like it was dishonest.
Yeah.
Not only to the
Yeah.
other people who you told like, oh yeah, I'm gonna run a 100-mile race, or I'm gonna you know lose 20 pounds. So if you're telling other people and then you don't do it, I think you're being dishonest to them. But the
Yeah.
more important thing is you're being dishonest to yourself. And that to me is and it's not like I have not achieved every goal that I've set out, but I feel like crap when I don't. And if then you do the post-mortem of like, well, why didn't I actually achieve it? And I don't want to be the type of person who sets goals and then doesn't do the work in order to put yourself in the best position to achieve them, because then I would feel like I would be being dishonest to myself and I'd be being dishonest to the people around me.
I totally agree. And the other thing too, you're really hitting on here is being dishonest to other people. That's why, you have this amazing story of, well, this amazing, I would call, system of support with, Jake, who works for me. And then obviously Matt, but you guys have this accountability group. And when I say accountability, I think how it really rings for a lot of people is the same sort of feeling as if you were to say diet or budget, right? It's like these words that have like sort of this negative feel to them versus something like, so I had a great spiritual mentor of mine. I went through a 2-year long Bible study called Operation Timothy, and he called it joyful accountability. He's like, because we embrace it, we love it, we achieve big things because of it. But I think the rest of the world doesn't really look at it that way. But what are your thoughts around not going at these big goals alone and having people who have your best interest at heart to answer to?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things. I mean, it's obviously the first step is finding something that if you were to achieve it, you would feel better about yourself, and that would improve your life and the life of those around you. And I think there's probably a whole other podcast you could talk about just the process of doing that and searching for that and identifying it and then saying, okay, like this is the thing that I'm going to plant, my flag in the ground on. Um, and I think that, the next thing is really the how you're going to do it. And I have never met anyone. I've met many Olympic champions, billionaires, celebrities, and none of them have done it themselves. And in fact, the ones that I respect the most are the ones that actually give away the credit to other people, and they're the ones that say like, listen, like I may be the one standing here, but like I'm not the one that got me here. And it actually is a pet peeve of mine. My respect level actually lowers when you see people who try to take on more of it, and they try to say, hey, like I'm the one that did this, and it's like certainly, yeah, of course, like we all know that, but like it not only makes it easier to achieve your goals when you've got other people around you, but it actually then brings people who can share in the joy of achieving the goal with you. And that is actually worth so much more than achieving the thing that you wanted. Being able to say like, for me, like going to the World Championships and representing Canada was a lifelong dream of mine. But the fact that my father, my mother, some of my relatives got to come with me, and then we got to experience it all together. We got to kind of go on this amazing trip afterwards together. Like that's actually what like stands out to me now. And and so even when people talk about, we built a multi-billion-dollar startup and exited, and I'm always saying like, listen, like yes, I'm one of the co-founders, but we got so lucky by having so many incredible people who are so hardworking, so talented, and so humble, and helped us along the way. And that's the reason. It's not because of like any one thing that we did. It's because of everyone else coming in with you on it.
I never thought of it that way, but that is insanely true. And I want men to really hear that point. I actually I ferociously wrote things down as you were talking. And I wrote down accountability. No one has to do it by themselves. Right. And that's actually a good thing. Right. When you have an accountability group, you actually share in the joy of your accomplishment and other people cheer you on. So I put that in there myself. But if we were to begin accountability with that type of end in mind, like, hey, when you achieve this, we're going to be celebrating. Right. I even think of my own experience with my son when we competed in that show together. And I didn't have high expectations for how I was going to do in that show. But I did really well. I got second in 2 categories and fourth in another. And then my son got second in 2 categories, and he won his posing routine and won the best presentation of the show, which was, I've never seen the youngest kid in the show ever do something like that.
Wow.
But here was the thing. It wasn't about the medals or the trophies or anything like that. And I told my son, because my son, my son asked me, he was like, what was because we asked each other, I was like, what was the best part of this whole journey? And my son was like, I just want to see how hard I could push myself, and, being able to do it with you, and then being up on stage and like kind of crossing the finish line was really cool. Right. That's how a 14-year-old interprets it.
Hmm.
I told my son, I was like, for me, it had nothing to do with the trophies. Like,
Hmm.
nothing, I could have cared less. I mean, I cared because I didn't want to embarrass you or myself. You're basically half naked on stage.
Hmm.
And I was like, but, you know, for me, this was a beautiful celebration and a beautiful example of accountability of how you can actually elevate a relationship with somebody. I was like, bro, I
Hmm.
was like, I had you to answer to every single day for my diet,
Hmm.
for my weigh-ins, how lean I was getting or wasn't getting, our
Hmm.
workouts. And I got to have the best conversations with you in that gym, and it made our relationship so cool. And when I was on stage with you, that's what I was thinking of, thinking about
Hmm.
where our relationship was in January,
Hmm.
where it is now, and the fact that you and I
Totally.
we'll hit the fast forward button 50 years from now, and we will always remember this time
Totally.
when I was 46 and you were 14, and what we did. And that's just
Yeah.
really cool. So I love that celebration around accountability.
And I think that like you have to humble yourself. And I'm not saying like I'm the most humble guy ever, but in order to have accountability, I think you need to take a step back and say, hey, I'm going to find some people who I respect, and whatever reason that might be, like they're, incredibly empathetic, or they have been able to have the strongest marriage, or they, are good at asking the right questions. Whatever the reasons might be, like you just respect them. And I think that's important because ultimately, like in order for there to be accountability, you have to be open to being called out. And if you respect the person, you're going to listen. If you don't respect them, then you're probably not going to listen. And so if you set up, a goal, whatever it is, and I'm a big fan of just including as many people as I can in on the goal, because, and of course, like people I respect. Um, but I know kind of along the way that these people are going to be like, hey, like, what's up with this? And, to be able to kind of say, hey, like, you know what? Thank you for kind of having the courage to kind of call me out on that, because in many times, like they're putting their relationship at risk, right? But if that's the agreement you have kind of going into it, and that's what I love about what we have with Matt and Jake is like they're willing to put the relationship at risk in order to better me. And that is like, to me, is like incredibly meaningful and humbling. And I'm incredibly grateful that they care that much, that they would do it. And I think that oftentimes people, especially when starting a company too, like people will pitch an idea, and their friends will be like, "That's a great idea," and it's like actually what they're thinking is, "It's not a great idea. I just don't want to tell them that because
Right.
we're never gonna go for beers again."
Yeah.
So it is tough, and um, that's why I think it's, that process of finding the right people. What are the rules of engagement going in to that relationship, and just being upfront with like, hey, I'd love to do this goal with you, but you got to be you got to understand that if things aren't on track, I'll let you know. And you need, like, I can't have you, getting upset at me for trying to help you achieve your goal.
Can I share something with you?
Please.
I'd love to get your thoughts on it, which, by the way, I just want to recap a few things. When when it comes to putting the relationship at risk, right? Calling somebody out. I'm going through a 433 alcohol free challenge as we speak. And I think I'm on day 16. And I did this challenge for several different reasons. Well, actually, not several, just really one big one. We have a lot of guys in our Dad Edge Alliance group, our mastermind, who wanted to redefine their relationship with alcohol. So we just had our live event back in October, and just last month, and there were 16 of us that got together, and we're like, we're going to go 365 days, basically from this October to the next year's summit, alcohol free. And guys were in. And so far, as we're recording this, we're on like day, I think 16, but everybody's 100% and everybody's good. Now, I've decided to do 433 because I scratched my head and I was like, I'm not a big drinker anyway, but like, but I was like, if I'm going to go to Halloween next year, like why not just finish the year and I calculated it's 433 days. Might as well go to the end of 2023. But here's the thing. I have someone who's very close to me, and I'm going to leave it at that just for confidentiality, who is not in the alliance, but has quietly joined just me side by side, right, in this challenge. And he and I keep each other accountable via text. Well, I checked in with him on Monday. How you doing? Right? Everything going well? Crickets, which tells me that he might have fallen off, and he's in that shame cycle, right? Now, here's the thing. I'm very good friends with this person, and here's where my mind is at. I'm wondering, do I push this person? Because in my mind, I'm like, am I jeopardizing our relationship by pushing at him, or do I let it go? Like, that's because this person's very, 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 very close to me. So I would love to hear some advice on and I'm sure you've been through this, when someone that is going off the rails, right? And maybe they're in that shame cycle where they're just like, I'm just going to go in the shadows and just hope I don't get asked again. How do you joyfully, respectfully bring that person into the light, and you do it without damaging the relationship?
Yeah, and this is something I'm not great at, Larry. So I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you what to do. I can tell you how I think about it.
Yeah, tell me what you think.
Yeah, because I think there'll be a lot of times you'll set a goal, and then in your kind of talking to people and bringing people in on it, you may have some people sign up for it, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to do a 100 mile or two, or I'm going to do 433 days of sobriety." But like that might be like climbing Mount Everest for that person.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to ask yourself, like, was that the right goal? Like for you, if you're not even a big drinker, like it might be hard but achievable. But for someone who's like their whole social life is wrapped up in, you're basically like asking them to like be an outcast among their friends.
Yeah.
So to me, if someone's fallen off, like I think it's understanding like not every goal is achieved, but it's the pursuit of those goals is what is meaningful. And if someone doesn't, like you still celebrate the fact that they strove for the goal itself. Like, hey, there's so many people that never even try, and those people know neither victory or defeat. And so I'd way rather be a person who sets a goal and loses than someone who just zombie walks through life not knowing what it feels like to win or lose. And I think that like I would be so happy for that person for at least trying to support you, and say, hey, you know what, like that's normal. Failure is a normal part of the process. That's what sport teaches us. And I'm sure that this person has definitely got something in them. It's just a matter of what's the right goal for them.
It's a good point. Maybe it's even saying, hey, feels like this goal might be really, really big for you. What's maybe something more manageable or something like that? Maybe just redefining what that goal is. I did want to share one thing with you you're a very goal-oriented person, right? You wouldn't have gotten where you're at today without it. I want to share, and I want to get your perspective on this. I actually haven't asked anybody their perspective on this, but I'll ask you. Have you ever heard of the book Relentless by Tim Grover?
I've heard of the book Relentless, but I don't know anything about the author.
Yeah, so Tim Grover was Michael Jordan's personal trainer, and also probably like mindset trainer, mental toughness trainer. And Tim Grover and Jordan learned a lot from each other. So Tim Grover wrote this book it's called Relentless. I've read it now twice. But basically it's how to be relentless, like what the attitude of a relentless individual. What Tim Grover calls it is actually a cleaner, right? I would actually probably consider you a cleaner. He's got 3 people that he represents in this book: the cooler, the closer, and the cleaner. And each one of them have their own descriptions. But my 16-year-old, he really wants to be more resilient, right? And he really wants to know what that looks like. And my son doesn't really necessarily enjoy reading. So I told him,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'll tell you what, I was like, I want you to read this book. And here's what's happened in the past. I've offered to pay him to read books and then their report on each chapter, and we have like these check-ins,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of them was like financial freedom. Another one was the richest man in Babylon, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them, I would check in with him like, hey man, like where are we at with the book? And he'd be like, oh, I haven't gotten to it, haven't gotten to it, haven't gotten to it. And we would both kind of forget about it, which quite frankly, as his father and someone who's trying to lead him, I'm also letting him down by not, I'm leaving it up to a 16-year-old to create the container of how he operates, right? Which he's not ready for that yet. So here's what I'm holding up. So this right here, I made this graphic for him.
Mm-hmm.
This is Relentless Reading Challenge. And at the very end, you can see the final check-in. I'm going to pay him $500 for doing this. I'm a big believer in, it's not necessarily the $500. At least he wants to buy a baritone saxophone, which is like $2,000. And he's like, will you buy this for
Mm-hmm.
me? I'm like, no, but you can save up for it. And here's one way you can earn money. I truly believe in, there are several books out there that will teach life lessons that he's never going to learn in high school. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
to me, this is like
Yeah.
tuition. So, but
Yeah.
on this graph, what I did is I said, if you complete this project by the end of the year, you will, and we do these check-ins, you will have earned your money. Now, what I did is book is 223 pages long. I'm holding it up. Each day he reads Sunday through Thursday, 6 pages, and that's it, just 6 pages. The blue highlights that you see here is when he and I have check-ins and when I quiz him, and I send him a quiz and then we talk about it and we go through it. And without the actual dates of the check-ins, which all of these dates are accounted for, every single one, and then the final check-in. But here's what I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed. What I'm also teaching him is like, hey, you're going to learn some beautiful life lessons in this book, but this is also how you chip away at goals, right? You don't eat the elephant one bite, you chip away at it and you break it in to
Mm-hmm.
steps. And this is how you check in to make sure that we're doing the thing that we agreed that you're going to do, which so far has worked out unbelievable, man. Like
Mm.
unbelievable. And it's added, I think, also so much credibility to our relationship. But I'd love to get your thoughts. And here's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for like, oh, that's awesome and attaboy. I want to know from your perspective, being an athlete, being a uber successful entrepreneur, what what do you think of that?
Well, I think first of all, I wouldn't claim to be an uber successful entrepreneur. I feel like every day is day zero right now, so we've still got a long ways to go. But I mean, what you've put in front of me here, like the structure around it, the fact that there's a reward at the end of it, is like 99 times more than I think what anyone would ever do around this. So, like, first of all, I think that's amazing. Um, I think when it comes to goals, especially doing things that you don't really want to do, like I don't particularly even like running, um, but I like the clarity, like we talked about at the outset of the podcast, and to me, it's like, what am I going to gain? Either because I did this or during it. That to me is what I try to think about and what's motivating to me. And so, like when I think about reading, like how I kind of got into reading, I tried to read like books like you've described as a teenager, and I just couldn't. But I was really into like fantasy. There was like, there was books that were about like I think it was not Game of Thrones, but The Wheel of Time. These are like massive books, and those were engaging. Those were interesting. So I learned how to enjoy reading first, and then after that, then I could crush out the books that were more focused on like financial literacy or how to become a better person. Um, because I think it's tough as a kid to read something about financial literacy or how to become relentless or have better resilience because they don't really get the benefit of that right away. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
good point.
And so like the fact that you've tied some sort of reward to it, I think is amazing, because they're like, okay, I get an immediate benefit at the end of it. The question is, do you want the reward to be financial, or do you want the reward attached to the content of the book or the goal?
Mm.
So like, if let's just say if my sons, when they're older, if they wanted to like go to Italy, it's like, okay, well, that's like what they.
No, I kind of lost you there. I think your Bluetooth disconnected. Yeah, I still can't hear you. There we go. I think. No, I can hear you.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're good.
Sorry about that.
Thank you,
So
technical
I think
difficulties.
no worries. So yeah, I think I would try to say, okay, well, if you want to go to Italy, then we need to learn how to speak Italian, or we're going to learn how to, Italian cooking, or we're going to go up to the mountains in northern Italy. So that means we need to, be in this level of conditioning. So if you want to teach resilience, it's like that's something that you want to do. You want that for him, and then it comes down to like, how do you get him to want that for himself? And actually, I was just talking to someone about motivating their team, and how do you motivate a team? And my mentor told me, he's like, well, I just don't hire people who need motivation. I was like, that's that's one way of approaching it. And he was saying, yeah, the team is not showing up to practice sometimes, and and he's like, what do I do? Do I come down hard on them, or do I, try to um, sit down with them and try to like set goals with them? And he says, because the way he sees it, if he missed practice, he would feel bad just because he knows that he didn't get better that day. The punishment was already built into the fact that he missed practice. And I think that that's an interesting way of looking at like missing something on the way to a goal, or thinking about goals more broadly, is that if you miss doing the thing that you need to achieve your goal, the punishment is already built in because you're one step further from achieving the thing that you actually wanted. And so I imagine that your son, like, does he want to be? And again, I don't know your son at all, but I'm assuming you want him to be resilient because you expect that there's going to be lots of challenges in life that you want him to be able to overcome. But in terms of like, how do you get the payback on that more immediate and tied to actually the benefit of being resilient, like going out and doing an adventure together, or something interesting where you actually use the things in the book that you learned.
Dang.
Maybe, again, I don't know. I'm just shooting from the hip here, Larry.
I love that idea. So, basically the celebration is also tied to maybe something that he experienced in the journey of the accountability. I'm actually writing this down, of the accountability that we structured for him. I love that, man. Yeah, I was thinking financial because the kid, he plays music and he plays saxophone, and he desperately wants like this baritone sax. And he's like, how can I make more money? And
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, well, this is one way, you could put money towards it. But I love that. I really, really love that. And I love doing, I've got this long history of doing tough things with my kids, like we've climbed 14ers, and we've ran Spartan races and Tough Mudders, and we've done all kinds of really cool stuff. We've done rites of passage. We did a 15-hour crucible, me and him together, where it was run by Navy SEALs.
Oh
Sounds a bit,
man.
yeah, it sounds a bit extreme, but I mean, it was doable, right? It was tough, but it wasn't like they're trying to like decimate you. They put you through physical, mental,
Hmm.
and emotional evolutions, but they do it, in a teenager container, right? They're not going to like kill your kid or you. And then they
Hmm.
bring it, it's kind of like you were talking about, you share pain together as men, or together. And then you bring it back to like this beautiful coaching moment, right? Where and I would actually hesitate to call it pain, discomfort, right? Like he and I had to get in an ice bath, 2 rounds of it for 3 minutes, and just like look at each other in the
That,
eye and get each other
that's
through it.
painful.
Oh, it was horrible.
That's
But
painful.
but then after you're done with the ice bath, what they do is then they bring it to a coaching moment of like, when obstacles strike, or when you want to panic, or when you want to freak out, remember you can calm yourself down. right? You can use each other
Mhm.
to calm each other down, those types of things. So they would do that. I really like
Mhm.
this, man. This was a lot of fun. Just as we wrap up here, I want to bring this all full circle. So your entire history with wrestling at a super high competitive level for so many years, doing startups, being a married man now for 4 years and 2 months, having two boys, and everything that you've learned to date, right? Through wrestling, through competition, through life lessons. How do you incorporate that into being a better husband and a better dad?
Yeah, I'd say it's a work in progress, Larry. Like I
Of course.
definitely, even coming on here, I was like, man, I got so many things I'm trying to work on. Um, yeah, I think that, for me, I'm incorporating a lot of what I learned in terms of like trying to like think things through a lot more and trying to, support I know, for example, if I want to really achieve anything, if I want my family to do anything, I know that I'm going to need to work together on that with other people. I need to bring other people in. Um, and I think that, being able to kind of set goals as a family, being able to, make sure that people are along for the journey. Um, those are some of the things that I've brought in. But by no means like do I think that I've like got it figured out at all. And like I'd say, running a 700 person startup and um, having two kids in the last 3 years during COVID, like it's a huge challenge. But I think that um, I'm able to manage a lot of the stress quite a bit. Like things can be up and down at Neo, but I know that I can't, I would never bring that home. Like I know that I need to be a rock at home because, you know, I can't have my family riding the roller coaster of a tech startup. And sport, there's so many highs and lows in sport. There's wins, there's losses, there's injuries, there's setbacks all the time. And having gone through that as an athlete, it just set me up so well to kind of go into an environment like entrepreneurship or tech startups that have a lot of ups and downs, and then knowing that like, okay, well, I can't have my whole life upside down because I had a loss at work. And at home, if something's not going right, or if I don't feel like my relationship's where it needs to be, I need to be able to be a rock at the office. And so I feel like being kind of incredibly like stable, um, and that really I think does come from sport. That's why I'm just so grateful for having been an athlete for as long as I did. Um, but I think that it's also given me a lot of humility too, in knowing that I just have so much work to do. I've just got so much, like life can just be so much better, and my relationships can be stronger. And so that attitude of like also knowing that like it's like this weird kind of simultaneously like saying like, hey, I'm great, but I also suck. So like I'm like saying like, hey, like I don't want to like feel bad about myself all the time. So I need to acknowledge that there's things that I'm good at, but I also can't just be so high on my horse and say like I can't get any better all the time. And so it's kind of like as an athlete, you're always looking for ways to get better, and I kind of always try to bring that attitude into my relationship with my wife and my relationship with my kids and the way I run a company. And it's certainly a huge work in progress, but I think that's actually kind of what's fun about it, is that it's never ever over, and I get to continually look at ways of getting better, and you can see the progress. Like you can see how your relationship is different, you can see how your company is growing. And um yeah, I mean, I'm just incredibly grateful for the life that I've had so far. And um I'm 37 years old now, but I really do feel like I'm just getting started, and I've got tons and tons of things I'm looking forward to, and extremely grateful for the people that I have in my life that are kind of are with me on this journey.
Awesome, man. I've really enjoyed this. Couple of quick takeaways, and I brought this, I wrote this down, which was that you never want to bring stress from the workplace at home, and you don't want to bring stress from the home front into your work. It's one of the hardest things for men to do. It's one of the hardest things for men to do. But I will tell you, and I'm speaking very humbly here, when I have a tough day doing what I do and I take it out on my family, they remember me taking it out on them. And usually a week or two that passes by, I don't even remember the thing that had me so worked up in the beginning in the first place. I can't remember what it was. It's not even on my radar anymore. Like,
I
it's
think
literally, it seems like such a big deal in the moment, but it's actually not.
one of my friends said, he's like, "What were you upset about a year ago today?" And he's like, "Can you remember it?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "So why are you gonna why are you gonna be upset about something today? Like you're gonna remember what it is a year from now."
Yeah, that's so true. That is so, and that's, that's a good measuring stick right there. I had a good friend of mine who always said, is what you're so upset about right now going to matter a week from now? But like, if even extending it out like a
Yeah.
year, like I don't remember November 8th, 2021, what had my feathers ruffled. Maybe there was something, but I don't know what it was, but I'm sure last year on that day it seemed like a huge deal, but it wasn't.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
True.
want to make I want to make sure that the men can find you if they want to connect with you. So social media, I know you got a podcast, or just any resources that you might have just for men in general looking for more.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit of a social media outcast. I've kind of realized a while ago that like it wasn't making me happier, so I haven't really been on Facebook, Instagram. I never really got Twitter. So I use LinkedIn, and that's kind of more for because it's tied to my business as well. So Jeff Adamson on LinkedIn, um, and again I've benefited from so many great relationships, and so yeah, if there's people that who I think I can help, I almost always answer messages that I get for people who are genuinely looking for help and are open to it. So people can find me there. Yeah, our company's neofinancial.com. We're not in the US yet, but for all you Canadian listeners, if you haven't checked us out yet, definitely go and check us out. And I just want to thank you, Larry, for having me on. And coming in, I think we were both kind of like, hey, like, which direction can this go? And Jake had kind of, I think, he'd also talked you up, and he didn't disappoint at all. So I'm really grateful for you having me on.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, man. I really, really enjoyed it. I love, like I said, just to recap a few things we talked about, right? Which is when you take choice out of the equation, life is simpler. How basically we can joyfully embrace accountability and look at it as the desired end state, as a way that we celebrate with a group of people that held us to the fire in the most respectful way possible, right? And also, I love the just this separation of, hey, work stress is work stress. I'm not bringing that home, and vice versa. So this has just been awesome, man. I've really enjoyed this quite a bit. And for guys, for those of you who want to connect with Jeff, I'm going to have his LinkedIn in the show notes, as well as his website. You can go check that out. All you have to do is go to thedadedge.com/Friday 81 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 81 for this show. Jeff, thank you so much, man. This was so much fun.
Likewise, Larry. Awesome being here, man.
Back at you. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. And as far as fatherhood goes, let's change the game. Take care.